Hey, it's Carly from Kip McGrath, and we're carrying on with our theme of literary devices. So today our literary device is a metaphor. Very similar to a simile, and that is what causes a lot of confusion. So a metaphor is also comparing something like a simile does. However, it doesn't compare using the words like and as. So no like or as, because that's for similes. It instead uses is. So it's describing it by saying it is something else. So we can have is, was, are, were, okay? So anything like that is okay. So it's where you're comparing with something else by saying is, it is that thing, okay? So we've got a little note down here about similes and adjectives. So children will find this tricky, and I'm going to talk as I go through my examples on the board about where they might go wrong. So first example, he is a cunning old fox. So that might be describing a person, a particular person, whoever it is in the story, by comparing them to a cunning fox. But you're not comparing them by saying he is like a cunning fox or he is as cunning as a fox. You're saying he is that thing. So there's a fine line and a sort of shallow distinction between them, but there is a distinction. So this would be a metaphor, whereas if we said like or as, it would be a simile. Okay, so that's one of the things that often tricks the children, because they will come up with the simile rather than the metaphor, because that is easier to do. Okay, the next one. Her eyes are a deep, dark pool. Well, they're not actually, and that's one thing I would often discuss with them. They're not actually that thing. The man isn't actually a fox. Her eyes aren't actually a pool, but it's a comparison which helps us to understand what the author is trying to describe. So the author is trying to explain that the eyes are dark and possibly draw you in, okay? A bit muddy maybe, you can't see what's going on. So everybody would have their own interpretation of that. But the idea is that they are saying that they are this thing, when obviously they're not, but it's a way of comparing. So that is a metaphor. If it said her eyes are as deep as a dark pool, simile, or her eyes are like a dark pool, again, simile. So that's a big thing we would be reminding them. If it just said her eyes are deep and dark, those are both adjectives. So that's another common trap people fall into, because they're not comparing them to something, they are just saying that it is deep and dark. That is different as well. So the is has to be a part of it, but also the comparison has to be a part of it. Next one, the ground was a glistening blanket. Okay, so you could be describing snow, you could be describing dew on the ground, but essentially they're comparing it to a blanket and they're saying that it is that thing. If it said like a glistening blanket or as soft as a glistening blanket or something like that, again, we're on a simile. If it just said the ground glistened, that's just an adjective, okay? So we're just describing using a comparison. So for our metaphor, it has to have is, and it has to be comparing. For an adjective, it's just saying what it is. For a simile, it would be using like and as. So they are quite difficult to understand, but once they get it, it is quite good. And it's something really, really impressive for them to use in their writing. So you would quite often get them to do a descriptive piece and possibly just pick their favourite character from somewhere and get them to describe that. Okay? Next one is her laugh was an angel's song. Well, it wasn't obviously an angel's song, but it's a way of describing it to show that it was very nice to listen to, perhaps. Okay, so it's a comparison. It's got was, which is one of our examples of the things we can use. And so that would be a metaphor. And as I've said, similes would have like and as. So that's the big thing for them to understand. And like I said, we can do lots of different examples of writing using these, or we could pick them out in their favourite stories.